As we get started, my name is John May. If you've never seen my face or heard my voice before, welcome. Happy to see you. I am the marketing engagement manager here for Webgility, and I've been here for about 5 years. I've been in e-commerce for a long time, and really the goal of these sessions, specifically the e-commerce clinic, is to speak to not just e-commerce owners or leaders, but people on accounting teams, people that work in operations to sort of give you guys ammunition to find the gaps in the data that exists. Because, running a business, especially in e-commerce, there's a lot of changes continuously happening to the way that data is, transferred between systems. Financial data is super important to being able to understand how your business is performing and make decisions for the future. So the goal of these sessions is to help you identify where the gaps exist, pivot or prepare, and understand, where your business is at and make better decisions for the future. So today specifically, titled "You spent $8,000 on ads. What did each customer cost?" So on its face, it seems like an ad return on ad spend conversation, but ultimately it actually comes down to being more of a CAC conversation or a cost to acquire the customer conversation. Ad spend is one of I would say, the biggest, I guess, nebulous topics when it comes to talking about CAC, because it can be really hard to tell what it's actually costing you to acquire a customer when you have a lot of ad spend on your budget. So, um, why this session? As I've talked about for the last couple of weeks, Webgility just put out a new resource. We call it the 100 questions internally. But essentially, it's a list of 100 questions that we have, gotten from e-commerce sellers that we've put together to allow you to see what other people are asking when it comes to understanding their own books. And it sort of ends up being like a you don't know what you don't know situation, in my opinion, right? Like, you can be super involved in your data and your day to day as a business owner or a part of the accounting team or a part of the executive team in general, and still not understand everything that's happening with your data and with your financial, uh, like paper trail on the back end. So I think this resource does a really good job of, sort of centralizing all of that information, all those types of questions, so that you can ask them yourself. And I dropped a link in chat for those that want to check out the 100 questions. These sessions will cover one of those questions every week for the time being. We probably won't go through all 100, but we will go through at least a lot of the more important ones. So the overall gist of this question, which is question 79 of 100, your dashboard and your bank account disagree on what a customer costs. And the framing here is that when you look at your sales dashboard or your ROAS for your ad dashboard, it's going to tell you one story, but it doesn't, especially if you're looking directly in your ad platform, it's not going to tell you what it actually costs per customer, right? Because all it knows is how much you spend on ads. And then just comparing that to your order totals isn't going to give you the full picture. So your ad platform might show you a clean cost, but your books will probably tell you something different. And that's what we're here to uncover. So the way that this generally works is we start with a question. So again, the what is it, number 79 of 100, and then we go through the walkthrough. I go on a whiteboard, kind of explain the nuances here. It's pretty surface level in the grand scheme of things. We don't have, a ton of time to go super deep into it, but hopefully you'll walk away with just understanding exactly how to calculate the CAC when you're looking at your return on ad spend alongside of it, right? So at the very end, we'll end with a couple minutes for Q&A. If people don't have any questions, I'm more than happy to give you guys a couple minutes back in your day. But I like to leave a little bit of time at the end so that you can ask your questions if you'd like. And I see in chat, Barakat here from Harati Saffron. Hey, welcome. Happy to have you. And I see you dropped your LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to have you guys drop your LinkedIn's in chat. I think this is a really good I guess, platform for people to, share expertise in their business. I know I've mentioned it before, but, I exist in the e-commerce space. I work with Webgility, so we have a very specific framing that we, approach these conversations to. But I'll never have the lived experience that a lot of sellers will have, where you guys have been in business for 20 years and you've seen how things have changed over the last couple or the last 20 years in e-commerce. So you guys being able to share those anecdotes, your lived experience, I think is a really, really strong thing to lean on. So feel free to sound off in the chat and communicate with each other. It's always good to see that. All right, but the takeaway kit here is going to be, like I said, the worksheet, the AI prompt, and a resource list. We'll get into what those exactly look like after I do the whiteboard. But pivoting over to the whiteboard, I've done a little groundwork just to start it off because nobody likes to see me draw squares and try to type in little text boxes. So let's start here. So how much does that new customer really cost, right? I think the framing of this question is trying to understand. Obviously, you want to know how much you're spending to acquire every single customer that comes through and orders something, right? It's important to understand what it costs you to acquire every single customer. And when you're looking at ads, and you're spending money on ads, it's really easy to blend that cost across all of your customers rather than the new ones that get acquired from the ads specifically. So, in this example, we're looking at a month where you spent $8,000 on ads. I don't know where that falls for everybody in here. If you have an ad budget and you'd like to share what your ad budget is, we can run those numbers. But 8,000, just a general number, right? So this is a month where you spent $8,000 for ads, and your orders got credit for, or your ads got credit for 400 orders that came in, right? So your dashboard cost to acquire the customer will show, $8,000 divided by 400 is $20 per customer, right? And that feels efficient. And I'm just going to mark that here. It feels efficient. Right, $20 is not a bad number. It looks right. It looks nice. It looks even. Pretty simple, right? But the one thing that is not being considered here is that 400 orders that you're giving credit to your ads for is including all orders, not just the new orders that came in from the ads specifically. So, what you want to do is look at, of those 400 orders, how many of them were new customers? So, only 250 of them are new. Okay, and what does that tell us? That tells us that 150 of them were repeat buyers, not won by your ads. Right, and that gives us an important caveat here, right? So 250 of the 400 are the new customers. So you want to apply the actual dashboard CAC, that $8,000 that you spent, into the equation for 250, not 400. So your real CAC here is going to be, again, same equation, $8,000 divided by 250 equals $32. So that's an increase of $12, right? Which, again, not the end of the world, not crazy, but it is an increase, right? So what this means is your real CAC is ad spend minus new customers, right? So your dashboard in this case is understating it by around 60%. So even though it's not a crazy increase, $32 is, I mean, quite a bit higher, 60%. It's good to know what the actual math is when it comes to understanding that CAC. So my question to the audience, as always, would be, what does your dashboard say a customer costs when you're looking at your ad dashboard? What is it giving you for your CAC? And then I'd be interested to know, when you include only the new customers, what that actually works out to, because generally those numbers are going to be a lot different. There are some sophisticated ad platforms out there that you can sort of integrate with your with your accounting system to understand the CAC a little bit better directly within the ad platform. Um, and generally, I recommend having things as integrated as possible. I mean, if you've been on this session or any of the sessions or any of the webinars or sessions that I've done in the past, I generally talk about integrating as much stuff as possible because it allows you to see things like this a little bit more transparently. You don't have to go to multiple places to find out where the actual difference is. Oh, and I just realized that if you wave the mouse back and forth, it does a little wave. That's cool. Okay, so moving on. Uh, so let's look at what the first order does, right? So there's another level or another layer of obfuscation here that needs to be talked about, which is sure, you have these 250 new customers that you acquired from ads, but what do those new customers actually bring you in terms of, contributing to your profits, contributing to your revenue, right? So if your average order value on a new order is $80 and your COGS is $48, your cost to acquire goods, we want to also work in the fees. So you want to subtract fees. We'll just call it $10 minus the first order reserve, which is $2. So that's another $12 in fees on top of the cost of goods sold. So what you're looking at the end of the day, the first order that a customer places actually contributes $20. And I'm going to make that green because we want to know that that is money that we're getting, right? So the first order contributes $20. And what you actually got paid ends up being a little different, right? So you were paid $32, got $20 back, and minus $12. Okay. So what this is telling us is that you actually don't even break even on that first order. And this has a lot to do with the economics behind the customer lifecycle. I've talked about that a lot in previous sessions as well. I guess as a tangential aside to this session, all of this points to making sure that your customer lifecycle is as polished as possible, right? So if the math that you're doing here, if you're doing your ad spend calculations and you're realizing that you're losing money on the first order, or that you're not quite breaking even when people come in as a customer for the first time, the obvious thing to do is to improve your customer lifecycle, and make sure people continue to come back and buy things from your store. That seems obvious, but it's a lot more than just having the right products, and having the right prices. It comes a lot more down to streamlining your checkout process, making sure the shipping options are robust. There's a lot of things that you can do to increase the efficacy of your checkout flow. And that all contributes to not only your average order value, but it also contributes to repeat buys, which will drive this number back up, right? So you'll eventually start to claw back more on that first buy and get repeat buys to offset the cost of that again, that CAC. So the cost to acquire the customer here ends up being a pretty big drain on your margins, but if you've worked in the life cycle and you've allowed or enabled your customers to buy more in higher quantities, again, higher average order value, or coming back and buying things repeatedly through like subscriptions, or promotions, that allows you to scrape some of that money back. So again, sort of a tangential aside here, but I always feel like it's worth it to sort of zoom out and look at what actually is affected by this conversation, rather than just saying, "Hey, well, your CAC is high and you're not doing anything about it." Um, it's good to know what actually can be done about it, right? So moving on, the big, I guess, point of this conversation, and why Webgility gets involved in this, is the reconciliation process, right? So what your dashboard says and what your books say are generally going to be two different things. Again, if you don't have them integrated directly and that information isn't shared between the two platforms, you're going to be seeing two different numbers generally. So for the what your dashboard says is what we just covered, right? So your cost per order is $20. Your return on ad spend is four times, right? 400 orders, $20 looks good. So what you're seeing from your dashboard is acquisition looks efficient, like we said up here, right? It looks good. There's nothing to change. I'm happy. Whoops. Let's just color the text. It's not going to let me do that. Okay. Um, but what your books are saying is, and let's copy. I can just type here. So you spent $8,000 to acquire. First orders returned $5,000. And that acquisition gap ends up being, we'll put a little minus there, $3,000, right? So there's already a gap from your CAC, from your ad spend. There's already an acquisition gap of $3,000 on those orders. So what that ends up being, and we'll just say your real CAC is $32, just to reiterate. And that gives you a four times ROAS that hides a $3,000 oops, acquisition. And this is sort of a hole until they actually reorder from you. So again, the main point here is not to say that you're just in the hole, you shouldn't spend money on ads. It's more complicated than that, and it's to say you should understand what it's actually costing you to run those ads and what you're actually getting back from it. Because if you were to look at your dashboard in your ad platform and it says, your return on ad spend is good and your CAC is only $20, you might say, oh, well, let's just keep running the ads. I'm making a lot of money off of it, right? And if all you do is continue to get new customers that don't continue to buy more products and return and repeat buy, you're just essentially hemorrhaging money just to get those single item seller buys back in the store, right? So if all people are doing is coming in and buying off of based off the ad, they're buying the one product, they're leaving, and they don't come back. It's not an efficient use of your money. It's not a good ad campaign at that point, right? Because you're not making the money back enough. Um, so again, that is where you would start to look at things like checkout flow, getting people return, looking at just bolstering the life cycle of the customer in general. And that could mean, further discounting things. So that might seem counterintuitive to give new customers a discount to get them to come back and buy, but ultimately that points to average order value. So if they come back and you have things that are able to be bundled together, and sure they get a discount, but they're still spending money on it, and your margins look good. That is the easiest way to claw back the expense from your ad spend, right? So again, these sessions are never to tell you not to do something or that it's a bad idea to run ads or, reinvest in inventory or, redesign your website or hire that new accounting, the CPA. It's all to say that you should understand what the actual cost is so that you can determine if that actually fits for your business, if it's the right time for it, if you can invest more heavily into it. So there's always that other side of the equation where you might look at this and your numbers still look great, right? So again, the purpose is just to understand, pull the curtain back, I guess, so to speak, and understand how to look at that information to determine if it's the right decision for you. So what does this all boil down to, right? There's three rules that we can talk about that are important to know when it comes to calculating your CAC as it relates to your ad spend, right? And there's a lot more that goes into CAC outside of ad spend. If you have a support team, if you have an onboarding team, this is very familiar for me because Webgility has an onboarding team. Stuff like that, contributes to your CAC as well, right? So any amount of money that you spend acquiring the customer and onboarding that customer and keeping them in the life cycle should contribute to your cost to acquire them. And that's all, it's essentially the flip side of your cost of goods sold, right? So your cost of goods sold tells you what it costs to acquire the product. Your CAC tells you what it costs to acquire the customer. So all expenses that need to be understood to kind of be able to make clear decisions. But what you want to do, again, three rules. You want to divide your ad spend by new customers, just the new customers, not all of your orders. There is the slight chance that maybe you have a customer that has shopped with you before that sees an ad again or something like that and comes back and buys, but it's not a reliable way to understand your cost to acquire a new customer. So you want to look at just people that submitted new orders, and then attribute the ad spend to that specifically. Understand that your first order rarely covers the cost to acquire them, right? So especially if you're running ads, you need to understand that having that first order come in is not sealing the deal. It's starting the relationship with the customer. I wish we lived in a world where, you sell the one thing to the customer and that makes you all the money in the world and you don't have to worry about getting them to come back. But unfortunately, we live in a world where you need to have people come back and repeatedly buy your products, to continuously drive profit and to increase exposure too. Because the more people are continuing to come back and buy your products, the better reviews you're getting, the more traffic you're getting, and it's just like an endless loop, an endless ecosystem there. So know what your repeat buying rate is. So understand how often people come back, what they come back for, and invest more heavily in the products that are in those categories, right? So if you have a handful of products that people buy on the second repeat buy, if you can follow their life cycle and understand what process or what flow people follow when they're buying your products, you can sort of push people in that direction, invest in essentially infrastructure on your store to sort of facilitate that process, right? And then just understand that your break even ROAS should be one plus your contribution margin. And if you don't know what your contribution margin is, we have done a session on that in the past. If you don't know what it is and you want to know quickly what your contribution margin is, there's a lot of resources that you can turn to. I mean, honestly, Google will point you in the right direction instantly. Any LLM that you might use will point you in the right direction. But if you'd like, I can also drop the link in the chat for the full video that we did explaining contribution margin and how to calculate that for your store as well. So in this scenario that we talked about, this number two, the first order rarely covers CAC. So in the scenario, this $8,000 ad spend month, each new customer needs about half a repeat order just to break even, right? So they need to come back at least one time to even break even on your store. And this is, again, just a general example. Your numbers could look wildly different depending on what sort of business you have and what types of products you sell. But this is a good jumping off point to understanding where that math starts and how it ends up sort of working out. But at 28 margin, so if we're looking at the break-even ROAS at 28% margin, that's about 3.6x. And if you're at 4x, which we're looking at here, you're sort of treading water, right? You're not actually winning. That's where you start to look again at the customer's life cycle and improving that process. All right, so the sort of capstone, I guess, comment to make about this whole scenario is, and again, this is something that I talk about frequently. If your ad spend is netting out of your payouts, so if you're looking at your ad spend, Amazon is a great example here because everything generally gets bundled into the settlement report, right? If you're looking at your settlement report where it shows the ad spend, and that's where you're netting your ad spend out of, your P&L is going to think that that acquisition is free, right? Because it's not considering anything outside of that settlement, and it's not broken out into the correct categories, right? So you can't compute a cost that you can't see. And ad spend should be its own line, right? So ad spend as its own line, fees and COGS per order. Let's boop, and that equals real CAC, right? So you want to be able to, and again, this is the same thing I kind of preach, is you want to be able to break everything out into its own segmentation. So you want to see ad spend alongside its own fees and COGS per order, and that can give you the ultimate cost to acquire that customer. If you don't have any of these, additional auxiliary expenses, you don't really understand what it costs to acquire each customer. And that is ultimately what we want to drive is the ability to have visibility into what all of your expenses are alongside each other, not just isolated, not having to go to three different dashboards to see three different numbers, but having them all alongside each other so you can say, okay, well, how do I look at this to understand how much it acquires or how much it costs to acquire each customer? And once you understand that, then you can start to determine, okay, do I invest money into my site? Do I invest more money into making sure people come back and buy more? Is it that I need to buy more products? Is it that I need to refresh my brand presence online? There's so many avenues that you can take it, but you can't really determine which way is the right way until you have the data in front of you and that you can feel confident in the data that you're seeing, right? So, again, you might look at the dashboard and it gives you confidence, but if you're just looking at the sales dashboard or the ad platform dashboard, you're probably not getting the whole picture, and you shouldn't necessarily feel confident in that because it's not giving you the whole picture. So I know we're right about a time, so I'll open it up to questions if anybody has any questions. I am more than happy to answer any questions you have. Otherwise, we can give you guys some time back in your day. I know, again, holiday weekend, so maybe you're looking at just clocking out early, and I wouldn't blame you one bit. But just to kind of preview next week, so we do one of these again sessions every single Thursday, 12 p.m. Eastern, and for the foreseeable future, it will be sessions like this where we cover the 100 questions. We go one by one and see what we can uncover in terms of like the gaps in your data and how to assess those. But if you are, itching to get more information and understand exactly what goes into, a clean paper trail, a full understanding of your books, confidence in the close, just talk to our team. If there are any Webgility customers on here and you want to, sort of refresh your understanding of what Webgility can unlock for your business, reach out to your CSM. But I've included a link in the slide deck for anybody that is not a Webgility customer to sort of look into what Webgility can do. There are multiple avenues that you could go when it comes to integrating. There's a lot of different integrations out there, tools that pull your data from your sales channels into your accounting. Webgility is one of those. And whether you go with Webgility or not, I ultimately recommend that you have as much of your data synced into a centralized place as possible. Again, because that allows you to look at everything from a mile high view and be able to make better decisions. So, off my soapbox, but I guess we can go ahead and end it here today. I appreciate everybody for joining. I see Barakat mentioned in chat. Thank you, very helpful. Thank you. I appreciate people when they chat in the webinar chat. It can feel a lot like I'm just sort of talking into the void sometimes, so I always appreciate people sounding off in chat. But if you don't receive an email today, you'll see one probably tomorrow with the recording and everything that we talked about. You'll get an invite to the next session next week. And if you go to the landing page, there is a little checkbox under the form that says register me for all future sessions. So if you'd like to not have to go in and sign up every single week, but you do want to get the invites, even if it's not one that you're going to attend, if you do register for it, you'll get the recording and everything every single week. But that is a good way to just get added to the list and you don't have to worry about it. So again, appreciate everybody joining today. It's been great. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week and a happy 4th and great weekend.